welcome everybody to another special episode of The Playing Field. I'm delighted to welcome today Ms. Gemma Lewis, who's joining us from Auckland at the moment, and really looking forward to another really insightful and useful episode with Gemma. Just want to thank everybody so far for all of their comments and their feedback on the events we've run so far. They've been really well received. And we're certainly looking forward to sharing more of the stories from coaches in NZ. So yeah, Gemma, I just want to say hello and thank you for joining us on the playing field today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's nice to actually catch up and see your face. It's been a while.
Yeah, it sure has. And for those that are listening, Gemma and I we've worked together quite a few times over the years. I start back from when we were both football development officers at Auckland Football Federation. We didn't work together for too long back at Auckland Football though, did we, Gemma?
No, not really. Now I think about it, to be honest, I'm starting to wonder if there's a pattern of every time I move to start working with you and then you leave. So I'm wondering if there's a pattern going on. But no, I didn't get much time with you at Auckland Football.
It's definitely not deliberate. And I think it's been really pleasing to obviously see your progress and journey in New Zealand during that time. I have been fortunate to see firsthand how you do work and how you've kind of grown into a number of roles now. So I think it'd be really cool to chat about some of those things and potentially give some of the coaches that are listening some insight into, I guess, what it takes to go from coaching locally into now coaching internationally. So with that, the beginning as a development officer, Gemma, like how long were you doing that role, and what type of things did that experience do for you and your journey?
I was probably with Auckland Football for almost 3 years when I first came over here. And to be honest, when I started off, I took on the community FDO role, and in all honesty, I was pretty green, to be honest. And it was good that I had good people around me, and that Auckland Football at the time kind of took a chance on me to kind of give me a foot in the door with football in New Zealand. So yeah, starting off it was kind of pretty daunting, but I learned from the people around me and the people I was working with at the time, and like Stevie Baxter at the time had a lot of time for me, and kind of you were there as well. So it kind of helped me develop and grow. And then not only that, but working kind of with the clubs. And there's so many kind of great operators at club level that even learning from them, kind of you were their FDOs, but I still found out that like in those meetings and kind of when you were helping different clubs, I still learned a lot from just the people on the ground at club level, and kind of good engagement and good conversations and striking up good relationships that helped me grow as a development officer as well. So yeah, that was kind of like where I was at to begin with, and I started coaching through FTCs, and it was quite minimal at the time. You kind of get a few contacts a week, but not too much. And then that's when I started to kind of go on the, I guess, education pathway in terms of going on to different coaching courses, and started with my C license. And I was lucky enough that I was able to take it was Bucklands Beach at the time, an under 16s team. And it was kind of like I spent almost 2 seasons there working with that team to try and kind of actually practice my skills, almost in a space where like you're not really under the spotlight too much. I got to kind of find where things worked for me, and I spent a lot of time kind of trying different things and not succeeding and failing, and finding out what worked for me, and where I was getting response from the girls, or where I was finding success. And I think in those environments it's quite good, because like a lot of the time the players are just happy to kind of be there and play, and see you trying to be organized and put something on for them, and you've got their best interests at heart. So they didn't pay too much attention if things weren't necessarily working, and half the time they probably didn't even notice. But it was a lot of kind of reflection and reviewing and work for like that 2-year period before I think I even I think I submitted my C license almost towards the end of the time limitation that you had to submit, because I wanted to spend as much time as I could getting as competent as I could at what I was doing. Where I often find like people are different, but people like to jump from one to the other, so to speak, and everyone's on a fast track and wants to progress and get as far as they can. But I think for me, it was like a little bit of a different start, because I wanted to make sure I was competent at what I was doing, and I was trying to perfect it as much as I could. Because for me to be confident, and for the players to be confident, like I had to make sure I kind of went through the whole process and worked through kind of looking at different coaches, looking at different styles, looking at what I was learning through like the education pieces, and finding what fits for me, I guess. So I was lucky with that. And then from there, I ended up going on to my B license. And I kind of then got, once I got my B license, I was able to step into the National Women's League space, which was probably my first experience kind of a higher level of coaching with Auckland football. So I was really lucky that I didn't initially get the job. Actually, I was the assistant coach, and then the head coach at the time couldn't fulfill because they were overseas and they weren't able to get here. So I ended up just by default, luckily enough, that I was able to take that season with Auckland football. So that was really good for me.
I mean, that shows like quite a high level of, I guess, patience and understanding to spend, a couple of years working at, with respect to community level before you then were able to move on. I mean, what kind of led you to go down that route of being willing to, work in the shadows, if you like, to use your words, out of the spotlight, before then progressing? Like, what kind of inspired you to not go down the typical route of just trying to be, top team really early and kind of make progress from there?
I think it came more down to like where the best fit was for me. And I'm the type of person where I wouldn't put myself into any environments that I didn't think I was necessarily competent enough or good enough for. And that's mainly, I guess, I think of it from a player's point of view. And I'm like, the players are there, especially at certain levels. They're there to progress, to kind of improve everything they're doing. They've got goals. And I think if you're in a situation where you feel out of your depth, and you're kind of at a position where you're almost, flying by the seat of your pants and just trying to hold on, I don't know it's definitely not what the players are going to get out of it. They're not going to improve. They're not going to get what they need. So I just think, I don't know, for me, it was like almost doing due diligence to the environments that I was in. And I was in and around National Women's League kind of helping out beforehand, but I was never going to put myself in that scenario until I felt like I could actually create an environment where the players were going to be able to succeed or be able to get something from or be able to be challenged or improve. And I think, I wasn't going to step into one of those roles until I felt like I could do that.
Yeah. And I mean, it certainly played out to be a wise decision because, you had a very successful tenure, obviously, at Auckland Football Federation. Looking back on those, campaigns, what were some of the personal highlights and growth areas for you that, you really made the most of that time working in the National Women's League?
Yeah, National Women's League, the first time I took it with Auckland was back when it was still one round. And to be honest, like at Auckland at the time, it was quite challenging to get the best players to actually want to be there and want to play. I think we do. So the clubs here in Auckland have such good club environments that the girls really enjoy their club and winter football. And because the season was so short for National Women's League, like it was always a case of, do I want to carry on, or actually do I want to have a summer and potentially not do as much football? So it was always, Auckland were supposed to be having the best players or potentially be one of the strongest teams, but that wasn't really the case for the last couple of seasons. But for me, what I found really kind of what I learned from that was almost just creating a good enough environment where the players wanted to be there, and the players kind of had some self-direction and self-led goals of what they wanted to achieve, how they wanted to play, and it just meant that the buy-in was so much more, and these players are already good enough. Like, I don't need to spend heaps of time honing their technical ability. It's almost just like it was spending being as efficient as we could to get them understanding how we wanted to play tactically, but also having them have a say in that, to be able to kind of buy into what they wanted to do, how they wanted to play. And it meant that the self-drive of that team ended up being so good. And it was actually one of my best experiences, or best learning experiences as a coach so far, was with that first season with Auckland, because it was something that in a short season where you train twice a week, you have no preseason, and I think I played the first game that I played was against Football South at the time, who hadn't won a single game for, I think, something like 7 years or something like that, and we lost to Auckland. We lost to them in the first game, and I had so many messages that were like giving me a hard time, because they were like, it's your first season and you've just lost to Southern, and they haven't beaten anyone in however many years. And in my head I was like, that's probably like the worst start we could have ever had. But yeah, it came right in the long run, and the girls were so good. But I think in terms of their back-in, their buy-in to what we were doing, just it was so good in terms of everything. It became almost self-driven, and that was so good in the short season that we had, that everyone was willing to kind of get on board, understand what we wanted to do tactically, and then be able to also push it a little bit more themselves.
Mm. And at the end of the experience with Auckland, I mean, was there ever a point where you were weighing up, I guess, continuing in the National Women's League or moving to New Zealand football? Like, at what kind of point did those interject, and then what ultimately led you to join NZF?
I think that season with National Women's League, that was kind of what got me questioning where I wanted to go in terms of, did I want to stay in the football administration side and work in the kind of development space and the club capability space, or did I want to see if I could actually be a coach and do that full time? And that was probably one of the biggest jumps for me, because it was like, oh, you're almost going into that uncertainty space. Anyone that's doing coaching or is in the career knows that it's quite, that nothing's very secure. And the higher up you go in terms of high performance, the more it gets to kind of results. So you're kind of not necessarily having a secure contract or a secure job. So that for me was a bit more of a jump to know if I was going to be able to do that. And it's also that kind of jumping out of your comfort zone and getting into something that you're potentially, it's like, we talked about it in times before, like you've said before, like in coaching, it's like kind of get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, if you can work in environments where you're able to kind of thrive being challenged and being in situations where you're not comfortable and confident all the time, you end up just kind of improving each area that you work on. So I think it was a big step for me to do that. But coming across to New Zealand football was presented as the opportunity to basically try my hand at coaching as a job. So I was offered the assistant coaches, the 17s, 20s, and then FFDP rolled into that. And I was lucky enough as well that they, because of the timings of things, they were going to allow me to coach at National Women's League if I wanted to for the next season, which is why I took Northern the following season. It was that first year of going to New Zealand football was a lot from going to coach a short season at National Women's League and then going full time into coaching 4 teams, was kind of the best and hardest times of my career so far, probably.
Yeah, I remember that period vividly, where you were juggling multiple different roles, different organisations, different age groups. The last thing you needed was then additional work in terms of, courses and programs and things like that. But obviously there was a point then where the FIFA Women's Scholarship Program came up, again, soon after you joined into these roles. I mean, was that a welcome surprise? Was that something that, you were willing to do at that time, or was it too good of an opportunity to turn down?
Yeah, it was something, to be honest, that wasn't really on my radar. But, when it came across the desk for New Zealand football, and yourself and Holly brought it to my attention, it was kind of like when I put my CV in and expressed my interest, it was one of those things where I was like, oh, like, this isn't going to be something that happens. I think they take like 20 women's coaches from around the world. And you had to be coaching at an international level, had to have your A license. There was like quite big criteria to be able to be involved. So I kind of, I think, put my interest in, but at the same time wasn't really expecting it to come to fruition. So when it did, it just became an opportunity that hard to fit around everything that was happening, but also too good to turn down.
And can you give the listeners a bit of a description around, I guess, what the program was? Are you still part of it? Maybe a bit of a rundown of what that program entails.
Yeah, so it was basically a women's mentor program in coaching. And I was one of the mentees, and there was 20 female coaches that were selected from around the world that had to be coaching at an international level and had to have their A license, and were kind of somebody that was seen as the kind of organization or the country we're investing in as somebody potentially for the future. And then also there was the mentors, which were kind of big names in women's football that were there and kind of getting partnered up with you. And you had Jill Ellis was one of them, Hope Powell. My mentor was Asako, who's the Japanese women's head coach. There was so many kind of people on there that were of good reputation and have absolutely brilliant experience in there. And it was kind of amazing to then also spend the time with them. So we got flown to Zurich, and you met everyone. So it wasn't just your mentor. We created a bit of a group in terms of it through the mentees. And even now I speak to Rian and Monica from Canada and Mexico, and like they coach like the 20s and coach the senior teams now as well. So it's kind of like creates a really good like group that you keep connected with. And then throughout the year, you had contact points. So me and Asako would kind of have calls together. And then also I went across to Japan and I got to visit her in her environments. And I spent a few days on their under-19s camp in Japan, got to see what they did. And then she also took me around their national leagues and their academies. So it was really cool to see kind of their setup and what they do. And it was so amazing, I found, to see how much people were willing to share, because it's very interesting. Like, I'm not, New Zealand and Japan play each other and they play each other often, but the amount of times that, she'd be willing to share what they do, why they do it, why they play the way they play. And it was the same for all the people, all the mentors that came onto that program. Like, everyone was so open to help improve you as a coach or invest in you, that it was almost like they were willing to kind of show what they do. Like, we had people that Kay Crossington from England, who works with the FA, Ray from Australia was mentored with her, and she shared so much with her. She was doing a piece on kind of basically all the different ways in women's football across the World Cups and everything that she'd been through, all the attacking kind of final thirds. And she created this whole document and this big analysis piece on every single way that there has been documented or has happened to score in the final third, because she loved attacking. And she shared that massive kind of piece of work with Ray. And it's like, that's England and Australia, and people that are willing to kind of share their experiences and share the knowledge that they have to help improve you as an individual, but by by default improving the other country as well, because that's stuff you take back to your country and kind of share with them as well. So it became just a really, really valuable program. And it was only a year, but I think the one thing that I'm trying to do now is maintain those relationships, because people are still so willing to help, even in this scenario. So yeah, I think it's really good to just keep maintaining those relationships now.
And again, that sounds like another year where it was very busy with a lot of international travel, a lot of long haul flights, a lot of moving around. Was the World Cup experience, was that like concurrent with the FIFA program, or was the FIFA program before or after Uruguay?
So I was in Zurich, and then I was flown from Zurich to Uruguay. So that ended up kind of making that stay a lot longer, but it was too long to fly back to New Zealand and then go again. I think I would literally get off a plane and then get on a plane a day later to go to Uruguay. So they were really good about it and just flew me straight to Uruguay. And there was, I think, 4 of the mentees that were almost doing the same thing, because Rian was there from Canada and Monica from Mexico, which is interesting as well, because obviously Monica was in the final playing Spain, and then Rian was playing off against us for 3rd place. So it was kind of like we'd all met each other, and then we went into the swing of things straight away in terms of competing against each other. But it was a good transition.
Amazing. And at that point you flew over, joined with Leon and the rest of the team. I don't imagine you had much time to kind of make yourself feel comfortable and at home. I mean, how quickly were you put to work, and what type of things were you doing in those early stages of the lead up to Uruguay?
Yeah, I was pretty lucky that I had like 3 days before everyone else arrived, so I could kind of get into the swing of things. But yeah, pretty much as soon as the kind of team arrived, we're straight into it in terms of recovery straight away, and then we had trainings, and we also had friendly lined up against Canada. So kind of that was, to be honest, other than qualifiers, the first international game that the girls had played that was outside of OFC. So that was pretty much from them, like me and Leon kind of knew this is going to be where we see how we're going to compete, because it was essentially our first hit out at an international team that was going to be at the World Cup, and that was going to be the standard. And as soon as we played that game, I think we were then optimistic around kind of the work that we'd put in back here, and how well the girls had adapted to what we were doing, and how well they understood their roles with limited contact. Because you know what it's like. We have hot camps in the holidays where you have them for 4 days, and to be able to get a team to know their roles inside out, understand each moment of the game and what's expected of them, and then also get used to playing together as a team. Like, it definitely presents its challenges. Whereas, you look at the teams that come from Europe, like their qualification is so much longer. They play, the qualification in Europe is so difficult in terms of to get out. So there's a lot more kind of probably time that the teams have together from other countries. So we knew we were kind of a little bit on the back foot, but also Leon was really good, and we all worked together to try and find ways to, I guess, mitigate those circumstances and try and limit the fact that we don't have as much contact with the players as a lot of the other countries.
And even the contact, you've also got staffing as well, and I know that a number of the other nations send 15, 20 staff. I'd imagine 8, maybe 9. I mean, how did that then kind of eventuate in terms of roles, responsibilities? I mean, I'm assuming you weren't just an assistant coach. And what other things did you end up having to take up?
Yeah, it's kind of, you end up being a bit of a jack of all trades, to be honest. But I think, that's the one thing that we're good at in terms of that mentality of everyone pitches in and kind of that you all have a common goal. And I think the players see what you're doing as staff, and they see how much work you're putting into it and how invested you are in it. And then you can see every time they went out there, they gave everything. They left everything out there all the time. So it's kind of like I kept wanting to put that work in over and over again to help them because of what they were doing. But you definitely have to pick up, it wasn't just an assistant coach, it became an analyst as well. you're also doing things because this is, under 17s. You've got 16-year-old girls, 15-year-old girls in a hotel that are stuck there for however long. You can't really let them go wandering on their own. So all of a sudden you become, you're doing team building activities, you're an entertainer, you're, kind of there as a bit of a counselor as well, because, everyone's going through different things. So yeah, it definitely becomes much more of a jack of all trades instead of just an assistant coach role. I think at one point because we had a situation where, Mainey ended up going back because he had his A license in Australia starting. So for the quarterfinals, I was filming as the analyst. So it was just me and Leon as a coaching staff. So then I was filming and clipping as the analyst, as well as trying to be the assistant coach at the same time. So there's definitely a jack of all trades kind of involved in that.
I mean, I'd imagine that type of schedule takes its toll. How did you, I guess, deal with or try and mitigate potentially some of the fatigue, stress, overwork, those types of things? Did you kind of consciously work?
It was hard, I think, especially come Uruguay, because that was like November. I think by the time we got home, it was like the 5th of December or something like that. So I'd already kind of done the full year in terms of I'd been to France with the 20s. I'd come back, I'd then been to Zurich, and then I was finishing off kind of in Uruguay. And in amongst that, I'd also had full-time FFDP, and then I was doing Northern's National Women's League as well. So I think by Uruguay was hard in terms of kind of, I was almost kind of at the end of the year, and I think I was like pretty exhausted, but at the same time, just running off kind of the success we were having and how much the girls were driven by it. You just never, it kind of kept you going, even when you were like the turnarounds between games. I mean, you'll know sometimes especially between the kind of group stages and when we knew when the quarterfinals were and when the semifinals were. I think after the quarterfinals, when we beat Japan, because we were going to go for it. We were going to go for it against Japan. But at the same time, when you look at New Zealand versus Japan in a quarterfinal under 17s, like, we back ourselves, but at the same time, there's realistic scenarios of a lot of people are probably putting their money on Japan a lot of the time. So when we kind of finished that, and then we realized who we were going to play in the semis, like we literally had like almost 2 days turnaround where we had to get footage on Spain, look at how they play, look at how it affects us in terms of our model. Like, are there any slight tweaks we need to make to still be able to press the way we want to press or be as aggressive as we want to be? And so like me and Leon were literally in a car on the way back, which was like a 3-hour car trip to try and get to the next hotel. Luckily, because of the relationships that I had, Canada were willing to give us their Spain footage, so we could get all the Spain footage we needed. And then from there, we literally, I think we were up to like 4 a.m., like me and Leon looking over footage, kind of putting things in place, getting videos together to be able to show the girls, because by this point we weren't training at all. We kept the girls off their feet. That was more important to us than going out on the field and practicing. So everything we did from pretty much Japan onwards, even up for the bronze medal game, we didn't train. Everything was just video work, group meetings, unit meetings, trying to make sure the girls understood their roles and what they were doing, because the physical output that we required from them to be able to play the game we wanted to play was almost more important than being able to kind of practice and run through. So yeah, the turnarounds were quick, and you were living off not much sleep by the end of it. But I mean, you look back on it and you kind of, you came back and you were pretty knackered, but at the same time, like the girls had amazing success, and I learned so much from that campaign. So yeah, it's kind of, don't regret it, but I definitely think came back in December and was like, I was finishing off the season with Northern, and we managed to get into the final to play Canterbury. And I think by that point I was exhausted. I was mentally a bit checked out, and I was trying to stay in it with the girls, and we ended up losing that final in extra time. And when I look back over that game as well, I'm like, oh, there's just some decisions I made in extra time where I'm like, oh, I'd probably go back and change that, or I would do something different. And you just wonder if you're operating off of being a bit fresher or not so tired over the course of the year, then maybe things would have gone differently in that space.
I mean, a bronze medal at a World Cup. I mean, was it enough to kind of justify all that hard work? I mean, that's got to have been an amazing experience, as you say, for the players, but also for you as a coach. Very rewarding.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's not many people that can kind of say that, and I think especially doing it with New Zealand, for me as well, I kind of relate being from Wales, like, and even when I was playing, like we were always the underdogs, and everybody counted us out. So I think it was quite nice to come to a very similar, like, small nation and still show that there's stuff that we can do and we can compete on a world stage. But yeah, it was definitely rewarding, and I really enjoyed it. But I learned a lot as a coach, and it's something that I'm still trying to take into other environments, and you constantly learning different environments, what works and what doesn't. Because everyone says to me, like, oh, what was different about that campaign or that group of players? Like, there must be an amazing group of players, and they were amazing girls, and everyone bought into what we were doing. But would I necessarily say that it was like down to individual talent or down to them being a way better talented group? Or I'm not sure that if we compared them to the 20s from before or anything like that, that's the case. But there's a lot of things that went differently, and sometimes it comes down to the group you get. We ended up drawing a pretty good group, and we knew that Finland were going to be probably favourites for that group. But so there's a lot of things that kind of fell our way, and also kind of the girls buying into the way we were playing, and how they wanted to, what they wanted to get out of it, and they wanted to focus on winning and results, and they wanted to definitely get out of the group, and that's the way they wanted to kind of run that campaign, and that's what we committed to doing.
And then again, fast forward a little bit, you then get one job. You go from having 4, you then lead the new program, which has got to be a relief. Again, how is that? Is that more of a program manager? Are you coaching more? Is it more of a kind of an oversight role? What does the current role as FFTP manager look like?
A bit of both, to be honest. So I kind of oversee the program and the players and the staff within it, but then also head coach at the same time. Because to be honest, we're a pretty small operation in terms of what we do staff wise, but we still try and get everything we can for the girls, and it's kind of an individual based program where we're trying to get each player to their next step, whatever their next step may be. For some people, it's picking up professional contracts, which we've had some good success with. For some players, they have focus on that education space as well. So we want to try and pick up good scholarships in the States, let's say, and make sure they're going to the best schools there, that have good footballing programs, because there's so many colleges in the US that sometimes you can kind of get lost in that system. So we make sure we have good relationships there, and we're kind of getting them on to those next steps as well. Or whether it's making the ferns, whatever their next step may be, we kind of focus on them individually and wrap a lot of support around them to try and do everything we can to see if they can reach that next step. And it doesn't work for everyone, and kind of people have different exit strategies, but we've had some good success, and I think when people come into this program, they also tend to realize if it is what they want, because it's not easy. Everyone thinks, oh yeah, I can do football and that's going to be my job. But then when you're training 4 times a week, and you're doing your gym sessions, and you're doing your top-up conditioning, and then you're expected to be at a recovery session, and then you've got your meeting with your sports psychologist, and then you've got your meeting with your nutritionist, and all of a sudden you kind of start to see what the world of being a footballer potentially kind of looks like, and do you have that drive to want to do that? Because we talk about kind of the girls going through phases of their motivation, and also there's going to be times where they're challenged, and there's gonna be times where we purposely challenge them. So we talk about kind of having different themes in different weeks, and sometimes we might have like, what we call at the moment like a red week, where we're going to put them under pressure. We're going to give them kind of limited help, and put them under stress, and it's about how they react and the decisions they make. And we work with like our sports psychologist alongside that to make sure that we're preparing for that. And then we might have what we call a green week leading into that, where we hold their hands as much as we can and guide them as much as we can and give them as much information as help as we can, because we want to see kind of how they can progress and how they can work under different pressures and different kind of coping mechanisms. So it's not necessarily just we want them to get better technically, and that's one of our big focuses, and we want them to get better physically. So those two are probably our main focuses, but around it we wrap that mental side, and that kind of emotional support and understanding of how they can cope within the program as well, because it's I look at it as being the way I am as a coach and what I was like as a player as well. But again, you're not necessarily in a secure environment. Things are based on your performance, things are based on results, and when the higher up you get in the program, like it can be quite stressful for the girls that are playing overseas pro, or that go into Ferns environments and play at World Cups. Like those can be hard environments. So it's about kind of shaping the player to be able to hopefully cope in those environments as well.
I've just got two more main questions here, Gemma, if that's okay. So first one, I guess with the uncertainty around when those next age group World Cups are going to be, I'm assuming that there's been some postponements. How are you having to adapt the program to ensure that players still remain motivated, even though the next big competition might not be for, who knows? How are you adapting that?
Yeah, it is a difficult one, because you kind of, most coaches and kind of programs will understand, but like you plan your whole year around these pinnacle events, when you're peaking, when you want them to be physically at their best, like when you're underloading, when you want them to be resting. So it's kind of like our whole planning for the year pretty much got pushed out the window as soon as all this happened, because all of a sudden we're peaking at the wrong times, and we don't necessarily need to be resting in certain scenarios. So we've had to kind of go back and reshape the calendar to look at what that looks like. We had June was a big deloading period for us, where we were so light, whereas now we've changed that. We're going to be back on full time pretty much, because the girls have had a lot of time off. When the girls were at home in their environments, they were still working, so they're still doing 4 sessions a week that we were sending out to them, but obviously they're much more individual sessions all around kind of technique and ball mastery, as well as still doing their gym and top-up conditioning. So they've come back in like a good physical space, and mentally they're a bit like puppies wanting to be let off the leash, because they've just been playing on their own for so long. But we've definitely had to kind of reshape the calendar, and for the girls it's almost just changing their mindset slightly. So it's again just becomes individual focused on them, their improvements, the gains they're making, and what they want to achieve over this year, because at the moment everyone's either waiting on contracts to know if leagues are going to start up or not start up. Girls that have scholarships are waiting to see if they're going to be able to go for those scholarships in potentially August, or whether that's going to get held up. We're waiting to see if World Cup's going to go ahead in January or not. But we still have to prepare like all of that's going to happen, because if we don't, we're going to kind of get caught short. So that's the way we're looking. These are the dates that are in January. That's what we're going to prepare for. And we're still going to work individually with the girls on kind of where their next step is. So if they're preparing for a league to start up in September, like some of the European leagues, then that's what we're preparing them for. And as we get more information and potentially more pushbacks, that changes slightly. But that's kind of football, I guess. As coaches, we have to adapt all the time. So it's just a bigger learning from our point of view.
Yeah. And then I guess just finally, what type of things are you doing, Gemma, to kind of keep educating yourself, keep developing? You've had all these experiences across the realm of different disciplines. Yeah, do you make the time to improve yourself? And if so, what are some of the things that you're looking at improving in the coming seasons?
Yeah, I think it's definitely been something that I've always been mindful for, and I think I had the last couple of years, to be honest, have been busy in that space, like of me improving myself, of me trying to get better educated and expose myself to more people. And if anything, at the start of this year, it's been like slightly less in terms of I've turned my focus to the program and gaining better research in what the rest of the world are doing there. But I think by default, that kind of educates me anyway, because when I'm talking to, the head coach from Spain who, the Spain women's program at the moment, between their 17s, 20s and their senior team, and what they're doing at their youth level in Spain, like the stuff they've invested in there is incredible. So even though I'm looking at the program and like how we can make FFDP better, or what youth setup should look like, or how we get better developed players here, I'm still learning in those environments by speaking to these people and speaking to these coaches from kind of different areas and different countries. And we may be talking about, what sort of programs do they run? What do the leagues look like? Where do they invest in their players? What age do they start kind of specializing and investing in these areas? But I'm still constantly learning from having these conversations. And then anything I see, especially during kind of this lockdown period, I found that there's always been kind of like webinars on, or people willing to, like, they're writing blogs, they're writing articles, they're putting sessions out there, and anything like that always kind of takes my interest. I always try and kind of like read and listen to things and see what kind of, what improvements I can make, or if anything like catches my eye. I'm like, oh, might challenge this, might change this, what would I do differently? So it's kind of constant period of reflection and looking at how to do things slightly differently, I guess.
Well, I've got no doubt that what you've offered today, Gemma, will probably put a few other people in that same position of reflecting and picking up on a few things. And just want to thank you for joining us. I know that we could talk all day around these type of things, and I've got genuine interest in listening to you. I think you've got an incredible amount of knowledge and experience to offer. So, yeah, thank you again for joining us.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And for all our listeners, again, Gemma will be someone that we'll obviously keep in contact with, and hopefully get Gemma back on the episodes again at a later date. But certainly want to thank everybody for listening. We're here to continue to shine the light upon coaches in New Zealand, and we're certainly looking forward to having you listening again soon. But thanks for your time, and we'll see you again on the playing field.